Week 8 recaps. Getting straight into it, starting out with the Seahawks versus the Bills. Man, as salty as I can say that I am about it, you have to give credit where credit is due in respect to the Bills and what they were able to accomplish in the game. I mean, they had a 100-yard rusher in James Cook getting 17 carries for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. Khalil Shakir, too, actually managed to have a 9-reception, 107-yard performance, which, if I believe, it might be one of his first performances overall in his career with over 100 receiving yards. Let me just confirm here. No, he got 105 against Miami last season and 115 against the Jets last season as well. Still, it's a good career performance for him. One of his better games that he could have had. So I can't disrespect that at all. Also, the defense held strong. They just made life miserable for the rushing attack, especially, which I'll detail all this deeply in a sec. Difficult to move the ball against them in the rushing attack, and that forces the offense of the Seahawks to become one-dimensional, and given some of the play calling, more often than not, it just flopped straight on its head. But this game, as great as the Bills played, the Seahawks could have matched that. And, while the Seahawks certainly allowed too much to happen, starting off with a touchdown catch by Keon Coleman, where he got a little instant revenge on Tyrique Stevenson, just mosses him with a single hand. There were opportunities for the Seahawks to still accomplish what they needed to do to at least keep pace with them offensively. And at every turn, it just did not pan out in one way or another. Too many wacky plays going on. Too much craziness. A lack of discipline, a lack of focus. Mistake after mistake and miscue after miscue was made by the team. You have to take it back to one of their first possessions, in which they drive down the field and get just in the range of the goal line. They're inside the Bills' 5. And then Connor Williams, the center, decides to throw this high-ass snap far over Geno Smith's head. And he loses 19 or so yards on that play, making it a 3rd and goal from the 22-yard line. And then another penalty pushes them back 5 more yards to where they have to settle for a field goal after. An opportunity for a touchdown, and you settle for 3. But then it gets worse. As great as Josh Allen played, he did end up throwing his first pick in 301 consecutive attempts to none other than former Eagles cornerback Josh Jobe, who was on the practice squad. He was activated for the game, and he got the clean interception on him. So they're set in great position to take the lead. They're inside their 10-yard line now on the 7. And as they get closer and closer, you're thinking that they can just punch it in from there. But instead, they go for it on 4th and 1, which I think was the right call. And as Geno Smith is dropping back, he fucking trips he literally trips over Laken Tomlinson's foot. And he loses 6 yards. Like, at the specific point that he trips and falls, you can see him just before going completely down, recognizing that he just had a moment that was screwed up. As he claps his hands together in quite possibly just frustration over the entire thing. Like, those are 2 touchdowns. Game could have been 14-7. Instead, the Bills would subsequently score a touchdown with Dalton Kincaid getting a solid run after the catch for a 12-yard touchdown. They take the lead 14-3 into the half. Though that drive was also aided by, like, undisciplined behavior. Because Derek Hall would hit Josh Allen late. And of course, you can never do that. A couple of plays before the touchdown, this happened. And it gave them an automatic first down off of a 3rd and 7. Which, if the play stood, literally could have stopped them from scoring again. Maybe make the game 10-3, as they would just have to settle for a field goal at that point. Nope. And the worst of signs came up when Derek Hall and Seahawks regular Jarran Reed, who's on his second or really third stint with the team, they got into a hell of a fucking spat right on the field. Now, granted, we see this kind of thing happen in other sports all the time, especially basketball, where a player just goes off on their coach or vice versa right on the sidelines, and some national, broadcasts will catch glimpses of it from their cameramen. Whenever you have something like that going down in the public eye, on national television, in any sport, and specifically for this moment, yes, Jarran Reed is honestly not in the wrong, and he even later on in the third quarter, they would show a camera roll of him just trying to get Derek Hall right and coach him up on that, because he did commit an unnecessary penalty that cost them. And he had to be informed about that. I understand it from that perspective. But to go into an all-out fight, like they were literally grabbing each other's helmets and trying to jack each other up. Anytime that a team can have their opponent be doing that shit in infighting amongst themselves, you have that team right where you want them. And that would just stand to be the case for the rest of the game, unfortunately. As right after the Bills would score another field goal to open up the half, you would get a decent drive from the Seahawks before Geno Smith threw an interception that was deflected by a D lineman and then caught by a D lineman, giving them another chance to just run out some more time, just grind out a 7-play, 51-yard drive, and score another touchdown to James Cook. James Cook would get another touchdown to open up the fourth quarter, and they would take a 31-3 lead. The only semblance of overall offense came from Zach Charbonnet in garbage time, as he would follow that drive up with a touchdown of his own. I mean, man, it's like, I don't know. Like, even in moments of promise, that same drive that ended in a Seahawks interception would have some nice plays made, but to no avail. Right before that, Kenneth Walker gets a very promising game, which he was quite literally dead to rights before converting for a first down. But nothing, no ounce of momentum lasted for too long, and it even got to a point where Seahawks fans in Seattle were booing, which, again, does that really happen? Yes, but is that surprising? No. Like, you're literally that close to making things happen at every point, and you cannot manage to make those opportunities come to fruition. You can't compound on them, and you're failing in the worst ways. Why would a fan not be discontent with that? Ernest Jones, the first game for him, it was certainly rough. There were too many plays where he was out of position, and he made some decent tackles here and there. Even at the end of the game, though, he got banged up a little bit. Like, I was wondering if he was all good and everything, because he took a fucking lick. But that would have to do it for that. Game finished 31-10, and not only that, but 25 combined penalties is the most in a single NFL game this season. I'm not even about to act like this was a sort of game where every call was favored for the Bills, because it was not. And, you know, even if it was like that, would it have really had an effect on the overall score? It probably wouldn't have. But that's just something to take away from. Like, that is crazy. Like, 25 penalties left and right, just tossing flags out on the field. Like, at some points, man, you just gotta let the guys play ball. You know what I'm saying? And as I'm seeing here, according to the NFL site, there's an article from Mike McDonald, or an article about Mike McDonald detailing that the Seahawks need to admit sunk costs and focus on areas where they excel. Maybe it's fair. It is very clear at this point that you're struggling in the red zone, especially after a performance like that. You had multiple opportunities to get touchdowns on the board, and you're either settling for field goals or you're leaving without any points. Like, that certainly doesn't help the defense at that point. And then the run defense is certainly regressing, so that has to be checked as well. Just there's a lot going on, and that's quite the rough loss, especially when you know that they could have put so much more effort into it. You just needed that one extra play. You just needed that one play to turn the tide just a little bit, and that could have completely changed the outlook of this game. But they, again, quite literally got in their own way through this one. So at that point, dude, it's like, okay, well, you really don't stand a chance to win, man. But moving on to an NFC West team that pulls out a solid win. The Vikings and Rams game, in which the Rams, win it 30-20. Though, with the way the game started, you would have thought that it would have been a bit more high scoring. Now, I didn't catch a good portion of the game up until the early parts of the second quarter. You get a touchdown to Josh Oliver, and then a Rams response with another Kyren Williams touchdown. And then a response by the Vikings with a Trent Sherfield Sr. touchdown. And then the Rams would open up the second quarter with a touchdown of their own to none other than Cooper Kupp, which I did catch to tie the game at 14-all. Like, there was a barn burner on pace here. There was a barn burner at play. Like, I have to be honest here. Like, y'all really believe that Cooper Kupp was just going to be gone like that? No. Seriously. And Stafford was getting in that bag, too. He was throwing some dots out there. You know what I'm saying? He was making plays, escaping out of the damn pocket. Like, he was really doing that shit. Only, hey, he still wrote back a little bit. Defense would get to him just a little bit as they were trying to drive, and they would just end off the half with the same score, as both would do their best to tighten up. Now, in the early parts of the third quarter, it would be revealed that Christian Darrisaw would be out of the game and could potentially be out for a while with a hamstring injury. That still wasn't enough to stop the Vikings from doing just enough, though. I mean, they forced the Vikings into a pick by Byron Murphy Jr. So again, that pressure was getting to Stafford. Sacks and incomplete passes to finish off the drive before the end of the half. And then coming into the second half, throwing it right to the defensive side of the ball. Justin Jefferson would then proceed to get a fucking crazy ass 27-yard catch. Alright. But what do you really expect at this point? A man who, according to a graphic on during the game, has 69 such catches past 20 yards after the line of scrimmage, or over 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. And it's the most since 2020. That 27-yard catch also leads me to believe that he has quite the lead on most other wide receivers to this point. Like, the difference between 1 and 2 is probably very, very large. Still, though, they would fail to get a touchdown out of that somehow, despite being inside their 5-yard line, and they would settle for a Will Reichard field goal. Then the Rams would respond with a touchdown of their own, as Demarcus Robinson would become alive. Even though the person who was helping them get there in Puka Nacua, who did return to this game, did return in this game, and played stellar, might I add. I'll crunch the numbers in a bit, because, the Vikings do respond with a field goal of their own. But another touchdown by Demarcus Robinson, of all people, we give them a 28-20 lead going into 6 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter. The Vikings would punt again, and here's where something really, really interesting goes down. Even with Kyren Williams having 10 of 17 now of their offensive touchdowns this season, oh my goodness. And despite Justin Jefferson also getting his 31st career game in 5 seasons of 100-plus receiving yards, which is the most through his person's first 5 seasons, the Vikings would be in a position where they needed to stop. At the 3-minute and 19 mark of the fourth quarter, Kevin O'Connell, for some reason, after a long Cooper Kupp reception, of 27 yards would call his third and final timeout. I questioned this, and I swear I was going to light his ass up. But then I figured, okay, like if, certain things go a certain way after the 2-minute warning, just wait on it, right? The Vikings defense absolutely saved him. They forced Cooper Kupp on a 9-yard gain to go out of bounds, saving them enough time to try to make something happen. A minute and 53 seconds left to be exact. Now, granted, they would have to mount a drive from the 5-yard line. But obviously on Thursday Night Football, it's happened before. I think we all remember the Baker Mayfield drive of glory against the Raiders, actually. We all remember that. So, I mean, hey. You know what I'm saying? Anything can happen on any given day. Unfortunately for the Vikings, the refs would once again not be on their side in a moment like this, as Sam Darnold would get sacked. However, when you look at the play, Byron Young, who made the play, recognized and had a display of regret exuding from him because he thought he was going to get penalized. And when you take a second look, he should have been for a face mask penalty. He grabs Sam Darnold's face mask and twists his fucking neck to bring him down. That should have been a penalty. And they couldn't review it, so it just stood as called. That is certainly a tough way to go out. And I mean, again, the fact of the matter is you don't even get a chance to try to mount the drive. It's improbable stuff, but not impossible. You want to at least be able to attempt it, and you aren't. So the Rams get it 30-20, and with, again, good performances by some of these players. Kyren Williams had 23 rushes for 97 yards and also a receiving touchdown. Demarcus Robinson had 2 receptions and 2 touchdowns. And Puka Nacua in his return had 7 receptions for 6 yards. Cooper Kupp also had 5 receptions for 51 yards and a touchdown. Matthew Stafford had 4 touchdown passes and completed 73.5% of his passes. Outside of the 1 pick, that's probably one of the few blemishes on his night. And they needed that kind of game from him, especially with how rough things were looking for them start out this season, especially without their weapons. Sam Darnold wouldn't have too bad of a game himself, all things considered. 18 of 25 passing for 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's solid, It's respectable. Justin Jefferson, again, finished with 8 receptions for 115. No other receiver had more than 37. With Aaron Jones being the next up here with only 37 receiving yards. And as I mentioned, Byron Murphy Jr. had the aforementioned pick. It also sets, a milestone in the franchise. With this win, McVay becomes the winningest head coach in Rams history, surpassing John Robinson with his 80th. So that, hey, shout out, bro. He came into this and it started out rough for them because the Rams were, I don't even think I need to remind y'all of just how drastic it was for the Rams of old. It was terrible. The organization was in shambles, man. Coming off of that final season from Jeff Fisher, oh my goodness, they were just set on the path of a long, slow, burning decline. And again, it started out very rough for McVay, But that second season of his turned things around for the franchise completely. Again, recently winning the championship with them in the 2021 season. You know, all respect to him. Yes, the Seahawks, again, do play the Rams next week. They're going to win that game. But look, you have to respect it, man. All right, moving on to Browns Ravens. I did miss a little bit of the action, but I did see enough to get a good concept of what went down. It's good run defense by, honestly, both teams for most of the game. Outside of the one Derrick Henry run, which went for 39 yards. Both teams clamped up in that regard. Though, what do you expect in an AFC North divisional matchup, right? What do you seriously expect at that point? Jameis Winston had a great game overall, and his first drive started out relatively well outside of a pass that was thrown directly to Eddie Jackson. It ended up being dropped. Again, Derrick Henry has those thoughts sometimes, man. On that run, he was certainly thinking. He was thinking about stiff arming the shit out of Juan Thornhill. I was expecting it too. Juan Thornhill was a little prepared, I guess. Or maybe he was just scared of the aftermath of a potential Derrick Henry stiff arm and wanted to avoid it at all costs, which is fair. Who the hell wants to take that? Seriously. The defense, however, for the Ravens would start to undergo a little bit of a shift because they would lose some players on their end throughout this game. Brent Urban was taken out early. Michael Pierce, their defensive tackle, big fat defensive tackle, was taken out a little later. And they struggled to, I can't even necessarily say struggle per se. That might be a stretch. But it was just a back and forth defensive battle. And we get to the winding minutes of the second quarter. The waning minutes of the second quarter. 1:58 left. Browns start their drive to try to get some more points on the board because they get the ball to start the second half. If they would have scored, that could have given them a huge boost of momentum. Only Kyle Hamilton would be in a situation to freely blitz from the left side of the Browns offensive line, completely losing the blindside blocker and getting past him for a sack fumble would give the Ravens the ball back deeper in Browns territory. And they would score off of that with Lamar Jackson throwing a touchdown pass, contested touchdown pass, to none other than Nelson Galore, who I am surprised in the sense that he even caught that shit in the first place. He would come down with both receptions on that drive somehow, and thus the half would end with the Ravens being up 10-6. The Browns would respond with a beautiful moss over none other than Eddie Jackson. None other than Eddie Jackson getting mossed again by David Njoku on National Tight Ends Day. It would take a little bit of back and forth punting for both teams before Mark Andrews would one-up his ass with a beautiful touchdown catch of his own. Just continuing to distance himself from all the other Ravens wide receivers or tight ends by scoring as many touchdowns as he can. Jerry Jeudy, credit to him. I'll get into all the full numbers in a little bit, but Jerry Jeudy, from what I saw, had a very improved day. And Jameis Winston, before the game would even begin, he would make it an emphasis on numerous occasions that Jerry Jeudy had to get involved in the offense in some way after his behavior during last week's game. He made it a point to go out and make that happen, and surely enough, he did. Could he have done more? Was he expected to do more, given the fact that he was drafted so highly and touted as a high prospect coming out of the draft? Sure. But any relatively good performance is good for Jerry Jeudy at this point. I would say so. The Ravens defense, right after that Mark Andrews touchdown, just allow a person by the name of Cedric Tillman to score a touchdown. Defense was crumbling overall. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah would also go out. He had to get taken out on a stretcher. But aside from that, the Browns still held relatively strong. It helped that Justin Tucker barely missed a 50-plus yard field goal to remain holding a 20-17 lead, and then back and forth punts, on both sides, before another field goal by the Browns with just 4 minutes and 59 seconds left in the game. The Ravens would get it back a little later, and Lamar Jackson would lead a 6-play, 91-yard drive, capped off by a Derrick Henry rushing touchdown to take the lead. Now, one would think that the defense would step up in this moment. And granted, for most of the game, most players on that end just weren't. But if one thing was made clear, it was that Kyle Hamilton was going to have to be the difference maker, and more often than not in this game, he was. But this play right here is certainly going to haunt him for just a little bit, as Jameis Winston threw a pass that could have been intercepted, was right in Kyle Hamilton's hands, and he dropped it. He knew right there that something wild was going to happen after. Recognized that opportunity had to be completed. Had to see that through. And he just did not have the means to make it happen at that moment. It probably crushed him for a little bit inside. And it would crush him even worse when you when you look at the fact that right after that very play, on a 2nd and 15, Cedric Tillman would step up again and get another touchdown catch as he beat none other than Eddie Jackson. Once more. I don't know what it is. The Ravens would try but fail to get a Hail Mary attempt of their own, and they would be down 29-24. Certainly a game that they should have gotten. It's a bad loss, an unnecessary loss that you don't have to. You're going to want that game back when it comes to seeding. To make things worse for the Ravens, they are right in making a decision on how defense is set to operate from that game forward, but they elected to choose the wrong guy. Because on Monday, they would elect to bench Marcus Williams, not Eddie Jackson for some reason, which confused me. You see on most of the plays. I don't know what they were. They had to have been looking at a totally different ball game. The whole defense was messed up. But more often than not, the big plays seemed to be allowed by Eddie Jackson rather than Marcus Williams. So why make that decision? That's pretty fucking strange if you ask me. But I guess they need a change somewhere, right? So I guess you gotta just take it with a grain of salt, move on from there. But moving on to the game, it took a little while to become a good one. And I suppose by the end of it, it is a game that some people won't forget. We're talking about the Bears-Commanders game, okay? Look. So peep it. It was the first matchup with both the Commanders and Bears possessing a winning record since 1991. And the hype was high for this one. The rookie quarterbacks turning a corner in their respective rookie seasons. More so Caleb Williams over the past few weeks, but Jayden Daniels also coming into this game with a stellar rookie season. All the hype around being a potential rookie MVP. That's outlandish, by the way. But, you know, it's warranted, right? They've both played stellar in these performances, and it all came down to this game right now. Now, the first quarter would be controlled by Washington. Just all over. I mean, they were getting down the field more, but the Bears defense was not breaking, even though they were bent completely. You know, they would be up 6-0, but you would see consistent punts back and forth until a field goal by the Commanders after a drive that ended on downs, which, honestly, the fourth down that the Bears attempted was just stupid. A 4th and 1, and you go for a bubble screen pass to DJ Moore, knowing that the Commanders are going to be in man coverage. I did not like that call at all. And they promptly, defense bailed them out a little bit, but they promptly scored after. Like, what the fuck? Another punt would send it into the half effectively. Now, it's like, hey, you know, they had a potential chance on this drive to go and get another touchdown. However, what we go down is that the play, the touchdown catch to Zach Ertz, would be reviewed and they would overturn it, forcing the Commanders to settle for a field goal at this point. Now, the Bears defense, and Caleb Williams for that matter, were doing their best to just hang around in the game because nothing, and I mean literally nothing, was clicking for them. Nothing at all. So again, after that, which would take place in the second quarter, you get in the third, and there's largely no action up until this field goal that would open the game up 12-0. However, at the very end of the third quarter, DeAndre Swift wake all Chicago fans up, getting a 56-yard touchdown run to make it a 12-7 match. Then, the kicker, Austin Seibert, for the Commanders, would miss a field goal, actually. And the Bears would be primed to go take the lead or make the game a little closer. Now, they would initially punt on this drive, but then after a Commanders punt, Caleb Williams pulls off some magic on this next drive here. A dot to Roma Dunze for 9 yards. A dot to Cole Kmet for 14 yards. And then a dot to the left boundary of the field as DJ Moore catches it in. Just barely. Getting his feet down in time, though taking a horrible back injury. That would sideline him for just a little bit. So they have first and goal from the 8-yard line. They get to 3rd and 1. And then they decide to hand it off to an offensive lineman, which was weird in and of itself, but disaster would strike because the exchange would be bobbled. And Jerzon Newton, the rookie defensive tackle, would recover it, giving the Commanders the ball back. But again, the Bears would get it right back, after a punt. They would need to score on this drive if they wanted to win. And surely enough, they did that with more productive plays by Caleb Williams, including a pass that was completed to Keenan Allen as he was scrambling to his right, throwing it across his body to a delayed route by Allen for a first down gain. They would drive until they made him run on 3rd and 5. He would only get 2 yards. Thank goodness that Keenan Allen was able to draw a penalty on Benjamin St. Just for defensive pass interference and get them to the 1-yard line where Rashawn Johnson punched it in for a touchdown run, which could have been the game winner in any other circumstance. And credit to Caleb Williams, despite the game that he had. When you look at the numbers, which I'll get to in a bit, he did effectively lead a potential game-winning drive when it mattered the most, and he needed plays to be made. He went out and made them. Could he have done more? Sure. But you got to respect that. Still, the Commanders would be left with a little bit of time to make something happen. They have one timeout. They needed to drive 76 yards. And sure enough, they get themselves in position to try some desperation heaves. An 11-yard catch by Zach Ertz would lead to them calling their final timeout. And then the Bears would be so far backed up on this 1st and 10 from the 35 that Jayden Daniels was able to throw to Terry McLaurin with relative ease as he ran a kind of speed out to get a 13-yard gain, get them closer to reasonable Hail Mary distance. And sure enough, on 1st and 10 from the 48-yard line, they go for exactly that as Jayden Daniels scrambles to his right, completely stumbles defensive momentum, rather. Just stunts all the progress that they're trying to make as they're trying to get to him. Completely shifts course, rolls right back to his left, and then as he gets closer to the middle, or closer to a reasonable area to launch the ball with the mightiest of heaves, he kind of charges it up a little bit. He steps into it for a little bit. It's kind of like video game-esque mentality right there. But he needed all of that time to make it happen. And sure enough, he was able to launch that from the 34-yard line. So about 65 yards down the field. It gets down to about the 2-yard line. And it gets tipped up instead of batted down by the Bears defense. And luckily enough, the Ohio State man, Noah Brown. That Noah Brown, wide receiver, number 85, would get what would end up being the game-winning touchdown catch, nullifying Caleb Williams' attempt to take the win and creating one of the better moments for the Commanders in their franchise history. We can say that. And again, that drive was supplemented by multiple plays made by the Ohio State men because of fucking course, right? Some, background for that is that these touchdown scores within 30 seconds by each team would be the first instance of this happening in this century and the first instance since 1977. But it gets even worse because after the game, the national broadcast was going to focus on the main action because of course. But there would be multiple pieces of content later on that displayed Bears corner Tyrique Stevenson celebrating a little before the play was happening, and then as the play was going down on the very far left, far right, potentially his left of the field, trying to ignite the damn Bears fans and taunt the Commanders fans. And even as the play is going on, he's still in it. Then I guess he heard or sensed something. Maybe he was signaled by a fucking fan who changed their, emotion a little bit. And maybe that directed him to then finally elect to go over and try to make the play. In an instance of instant karma, he would be the very player who tipped it back to Noah Brown subsequently. And he would apologize for it later, though I feel like that falls on deaf ears. Because you're just being an absolute idiot. Like, that makes you look like such a damn fool at that point. Like, that proves to not only the coaches, but your fellow defensive players that you're not even going to take a moment like that seriously. A moment in which people are preparing for every single week. Hail Marys, rarely happen in the first place, obviously, and are rarely converted. But you're going through these plays in practice. And they are set to be intense, as best as a practice setting can possibly create that feeling, invoke that feeling in the player. You can't necessarily simulate real-time tension in a practice setting, but they try their hardest to prepare for that. And you know that you should be taking that seriously. And you fail to do so when it mattered the most, and subsequently you get exposed in the process. Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous to me. But they lose it 18-15, again, last second. Commanders improve to a great 6-2 record, and the Bears remain above 500. 4-3, like, it's not too bad. It could be a little worse, but I don't know. You just have to do so much better on that side. Now, again, Caleb Williams finished with only 41.7% completion percentage and 131 yards and 41 rushing yards. He could have done better, but he still made the play that was needed to be made in order to potentially win it. Defense completely sold his shit when it mattered. Like, a Hail Mary of that kind should never take place. Almost never does. And it happens because no one is focused enough to do what they need to do in batting down the ball. DeAndre Swift would also finish with 18 rushes for 129 yards and a touchdown run. Well, the aforementioned touchdown run. Jayden Daniels would have 326 passing yards, and 52 rushing yards with the game-winning touchdown pass. Because, of course, Terry McLaurin finished with 5 receptions for 125 yards, and Zach Ertz is just taking it back to his prime days. Like, seriously, this has to be studied. 7 receptions, 77 yards for him in 2024? Oh, my goodness. I would not have anticipated that, to be completely honest with you. But now, I guess, the game that few people have really been waiting for. We have none other than the 49ers versus the Cowboys in Santa Clara on Sunday Night Football on a night in October. Now, if y'all remember last season, similar situation, Sunday Night Football game in Santa Clara in October versus the Cowboys. They got their asses kicked 42-10. Now, obviously, you already know. You know that the Cowboys would lose this game. But if you look at the score and you see that it was 30-24, you'll be fooled. Watching the entire game play out, this game should have been way worse than it was. If not for the slow start that the 49ers had, things could have been a lot worse for the Cowboys. I mean, I don't know. Like, here we go, I guess, right? You know, just throwing stupid passes all the fucking time. I don't know what Dak Prescott is like. Just what is going on inside that head of his, man? I really gotta learn, because whenever I can figure that out, that's gonna be something to study. Like, he starts out, punting, because of course, right? But then a weird ass interception thrown to none other than Jair Brown. It's like a situation where Devontae Turpin, for all intents and purposes, is a very short wide receiver, and he's already being face guarded by a corner. You don't see that Jair Brown is playing essentially free safety, outfielder back there, watching everything like a hawk, as he should. The second that you look Turpin's way, like you're giving him that tell by looking right at Turpin as you're going to send it over there. And surely enough, Jair Brown does catch it in time and makes the play with the safety help. Now, the 49ers would take a 6-0 lead. Well, not even 6-0. Again, slow start for them. They would have a chance to potentially get more points. They punt it, and that would lead to an Ezekiel Elliott touchdown. It would set, a little milestone for him. He became, a player who has 82 touchdowns with the Cowboys squad. So that places him in the upper echelon of Cowboys skill position talent. Jordan Mason would also go out with another injury at some point. But again, struggle bus early on for the 49ers. They would get another field goal, and then they would have a chance after another Cowboys punt with 1 minute and 4 seconds left to go on and get more points on the board. But with a sack and an incomplete pass, they would be forced out of field goal range for Anders Carlson, because, of course, Anders Carlson, coaches are scared of putting him out there because of how detrimental he can be to a team as it is, and you're expecting him to kick it from the Cowboys' 47-yard line? Yeah, no, he doesn't have that. So they would go straight into the half. And then the Cowboys would just lose it all. They lost it in this third quarter. Straight up lost it. A 21-point third quarter, starting off with a touchdown by none other than Louisville running back. I don't know why I kept thinking he was from BYU, but Isaac Grendo would get in to open it up 13-10, and then Dak would throw another interception. Yet another one to none other than Deommodore Lenoir, making a hell of a fucking play too. Like, he gets the perfect jump on the route. It's a little underthrown, but, you know, it could have been completed if Lenoir just elected to not react to it. Thankfully, he did, and that will lead to a shorter drive and another touchdown score by none other than George Kittle, who, again, National Tight Ends Day, you know what I'm saying? One of the, I guess, faces of it, let's be completely honest, as a top 2 tight end in the league, absolutely balled out in this game. And, you know, Brock Purdy would even getting in for a rushing touchdown again. By that point, they were down by 17, and punt after punt would ensue. Now again, effectively, by that point, the Cowboys, for all intents and purposes, were out of the game. Okay? But then they get a touchdown pass to a wide open CeeDee Lamb. Make the game 27-17, and then the 49ers would get the game-sealing field goal. But, you know, not before. Well, just after that, another touchdown catch by a wide open CeeDee Lamb for 20 yards this time would make it 30-24. Like, even if I'm thinking that they're out of it, I mean, maybe there is still a chance that they go out and do something, right? Defense does step up in this moment, getting the Cowboys the ball back, but not before Mike McCarthy continues to be a dumbass. And granted, I literally have it right here. Like, even with Kyle Shanahan potentially being in a spot to blow yet another double-digit lead late in a game, it seems like whatever the hell Mike McCarthy is doing just tops all of that shit. More often than not. I mean, dude, he called the final Cowboys timeout with 3 minutes and 15 seconds left, putting it all on the offense to try and score. He's really confident in the belief that they'll go out there and get the touchdown. Okay. Subsequently, on that next drive, pass incomplete to CeeDee Lamb. Incomplete pass. Incomplete pass. Deep pass to Kavontae Turpin, who, again, he stands at 5'9". You're expecting him to catch a 50-50 ball, and I don't understand it. Incomplete deep pass for Brooks. A 4-and-out on the Cowboys' own 25-yard line. No timeouts left. 2:49 left in the game. 49ers get the ball back. All they need is one first down, and it's effectively over. All they have to do is get just one, and they can kneel it out from there. And surely enough, they get a run by Garendo for 4 yards that takes it all the way to the 2-minute warning. Then they get another run by Garendo, eat up 43 seconds off the clock, get another run by Garendo, a longer 14-yard run, and he's tackled in bounds, which takes off 46 more seconds off the clock before a Brock Purdy kneel out leads to the end of the game. It's just always an absolute shit show with this team. But what do you really expect when you have a coach who is just so idiotic? When you have players who consistently underwhelm? Like, insignificantly, even Dalvin Cook got a few reps in this game and he only finished with 2 yards a carry. The rushing attack is still non-existent. He only had 56 total rushing yards by 5 different rushers on 19 carries. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, who again, this is really just garbage time. But 13 receptions for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns. If they just put a little more effort in, like, he was the only one who was actively trying out there. Dak Prescott gets his 243 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, but again, the aforementioned 2 picks completely ruined everything. Like, where was that efficiency earlier on? Where was that penchant to find, wide receivers for touchdown passes when you needed them? So, yeah, come on. Like, it just falls on empty ears at that point, man. It doesn't make sense. Brock Purdy would have a great game by his standards as well. 260 passing yards and a touchdown. Garendo stepping in for Mason would get 85 rushes. 85 rushing yards on 14 carries and the aforementioned touchdown. Brock Purdy would even have 56 yards on 8 carries for a touchdown. And he apparently leads the league in scrambles this season for first downs. Like, he's got a little bit of speed to him. Also, I did absolve from it earlier, but since I'm bringing up numbers, it makes sense now. Pearsall, who is making his second appearance in a regular season game, would cap it off with 5 total touches for 77 total yards, including a 39-yard run. That's honestly solid work by him. I can't disrespect that at all. Samuel, Sr., would finish with 8 total touches for 86 total yards. And George Kittle, again, obviously, 6 receptions for 128 yards and a touchdown. He got the, custom belt for National Tight Ends Day at the very end. Because, of course, it was going to come down between him and Jake Ferguson, of all people. We knew who was getting that goddamn belt. We knew who was going to ball out when the lights got brightest during that game. It was always going to be George Kittle. Nobody was worried about Jake Ferguson in that regard. I can promise you that much. Like, let's just compare that real quick before I even move on. Ferguson would only finish with 6 receptions for 23 yards. But, he's certainly an aspiring tight end in the NFL. Okay. You fucking sure about that? Moving on to the Steelers and Giants. Coming into it, there's a lot of precedent here. A lot of it. Apparently, we know Daniel Jones is 1-14 in primetime coming into this game, but he was also 0-7 on Monday Night Football. The Steelers also came into this one with a 13-1 record in their last 14 Monday Night Football games and 20 plus straight wins at home on Monday Night Football. Now, granted, all those trends would remain the same, relatively speaking, as the Steelers would win 26-18, making Daniel Jones 1-15 in primetime and 0-8 on Monday Night Football, making the Steelers 14-1 in their last 15 and granting them 22 straight wins at home on Monday Night Football. But of course, this did not happen without its fair share of twists and wild-ass turns. Okay? Something happened to Dexter Lawrence a second earlier, because I noted, as I was handling my own work, I looked down for 1 second, and then I see him on the ground. So I questioned that, but he would return over the course of the game. So I guess it was nothing too drastic. There would be multiple situations throughout the game where the Steelers got favorable plays and some touchdowns in some cases to none other than George Pickens, but they would be overturned by stupid penalties from their other players. All right? I mean, no defense, neither offense was able to do much of anything, with it being a 9-9 ball game, 9-9 ball game, by the end of the half. I mean, they were just allowing Russell Wilson to get sacked by these 300-plus pound players. I just don't know how they let them continuously get past them, and they're supposed to be doing their job in blocking. But on the end of the Giants also, Daniel Jones is just ass. He's ass. I mean, he was in a situation on an earlier drive in the second quarter. He gives Darius Slayton a hospital ball of hell. It's also a great play that's made by Minkah Fitzpatrick to make contact like that. But the ball was put in such such horrible ball placement on that particular throw. What was Darius Slayton supposed to do about that? He suffered a hit that would sideline him for a little bit. The slow play would continue as the Steelers' edge rush would continue to enforce that pressure on Daniel Jones. And anytime Daniel Jones feels just a little bit of pressure, whether it was from Alex Highsmith, whether it was from TJ Watt, whether it was from Cameron Hayward, he was gonna crumble. And surely enough, that led to 3 different punts in the third quarter alone by the Giants. That would give them 22 straight drives, without scoring a single touchdown. But one of their punts would lead to the beginning of touchdown scoring on either side for this game, as on their second punt of the third quarter, Calvin Austin would return a punt for 73 yards for the score and ignite the terrible towels in the stands. They were waving him all over the place. Well deserved, honestly. And credit to Calvin Austin the third rather. He made some good plays throughout this game, even when more of the attention was granted to players who were honestly better. It's always next man up, though, and you got to appreciate someone being able to come through when it counts. Can't ever really hate on that. The Steelers have outscored opponents 53-0 in the third quarter to this point. Mike Tomlin, and later on would add to this by closing out the game, has the 7th most wins for one franchise, with over 180. Russell Wilson was continuing to fucking cook like the chef that he is, man. Opening up the fourth quarter with another touchdown to none other than Calvin Austin, with a 29-yard reception that would open the game up 23-9. The Giants would break their streak of mediocre offensive play and make this game a little more competitive with a run of 45 yards by Tyrone Tracy Jr., the rookie, for a touchdown, making it 23-15. However, and I did not initially see it, but I did catch what the 2-point conversion looked like afterwards, and I have to say, wow, I was astonished by that. I don't even know what to make of it. Like, that play, 5 fucking offensive linemen to one side and a wide receiver behind him. Then 3 offensive linemen in the middle with the center. Like, and then another player on the right side. Like, that is straight out of college. That play would work in college. This is the pros. I don't know who came up with that. I don't know if it was Dable. I don't know if it was the offensive coordinator. But somebody's got an answer for that shit. Because what? That's just ludicrous. Like, how does that even come to mind for you to go for that shit? I don't know. It beats me. And they would get another field goal. And then the Giants would respond with another field goal, making the game 26-18. Things got very interesting when Russell Wilson attempted to run, but the ball, smartly, and might I add, again, Charles Tillman would be proud of that peanut punch right on the ball as Russell Wilson was about to fall down and give himself up. Bobby Okereke, the linebacker, punched it out. Giants get the ball back inside the Pittsburgh 40. They have a chance to mount a touchdown drive, relatively short touchdown drive, and tie up the game. Only the Steelers and good old TJ Watt, because of course, counter that by batting the ball straight out of Daniel Jones' hands as he is stepping back. And he gets strip sacked for a fumble recovered by TJ Watt himself after forcing it. Now, the Steelers don't do anything with this possession, though again, the Giants and Dable call all 3 of their timeouts before the 2-minute warning. Now, they did end up stopping them, but you're just making it that much harder on your offense. They got to start from the 7-yard line with 1 minute and 53 seconds left to go and no timeouts. That's not a favorable position to be in compared to maybe having a little less time on the clock, but more timeouts at your disposal, right? Like, what the hell? They would drive a good amount. They would get to the 35-yard line. But, hey, even with Daniel Jones somehow staying in this thing, when it was time for him to do his specialty, oh, he did all right. He did, throwing it right to Beanie Bishop Jr. for the game-losing interception. It's what he does best. Again, Tyrone Tracy Jr., for their sake, he was their saving grace in this game, and he would even get hurt. So they would lose him for a little bit. Now, granted, at that point, they needed to pass the ball. You couldn't really afford to run too much. But 20 rushes for 145 yards and the aforementioned touchdown is great production. Daniel Jones, meanwhile, finished with 264 yards passing on 63.2% completion and an interception. Malik Neighbors would get 13 damn targets because they just want to, seriously put this man in harm's way, I guess. Darius Slayton would also finish with 108 receiving yards on 4 catches. You keep utilizing Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot, and maybe he is built like one, but the damn 5 receptions for 30 yards shit, just wild, man. Like, I don't know about that, dude. Meanwhile, Russell Wilson has got this offense just clicking. Straight up. Another 400-yard performance for the team on offense when, especially under a guy like Matt Canada and even last season, those performances were very far in between each other. They rarely happen. And this has occurred back-to-back. Najee Harris had 19 rushes for 114 yards. Russell Wilson completed 71.4% of his passes for 278 yards and a touchdown. George Pickens had 4 receptions for 74 yards. Darnell Washington got more involved. Pat Freiermuth only had 2 catches, but they were timely. He'll probably get more looks, in a sense. Van Jefferson also had a decent game, including a beautiful 36-yard catch. Do I really consider him a good number 2 option? I don't really, but, if it works for them right now, I guess they're not as hell-bent on trying to find another wide receiver, even though they probably should be. Like, you knew the Steelers were going to win this game. Could it have been worse for the Giants? Sure, I guess, but hey. You know what I'm saying? Hey, man. You just have to take what you can get. You're lucky that you even lasted in this one. Alright, we will take it back to the Sunday action before getting into some more developments around the league. Starting out with the Chiefs and Raiders. They are certainly regretting trying to make fun of Patrick Mahomes' voice and mannerism during the offseason because he beat their ass down. Even with him getting himself in a spot, throwing an interception to Trayvon Merrick late in the third quarter, the Raiders turn it over on downs. Somehow. Despite being inside their 5-yard line, they lose yardage. Like, the Raiders are just an absolute clown show. They would follow that up with a field goal and then another fumble by Gardner Minshew and recovered by Drew Tranquill, of all fucking people, would lead to the game-sealing touchdown catch by Xavier Worthy. Nobody even gives a shit about this touchdown catch by Turner. Make sure that, I got this right. Okay, DJ Turner. Nobody gives a damn about that shit because you already had your chances and you missed them. You straight up missed them. But you wanted so boldly to take your shots at the MVP. You can't hit them. You can't hit them. Mahomes would finish 362 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception with 71.1% completion, and his passing yards would also lead him to cross the 30,000-yard passing mark, which is a great accomplishment. There are, a good pool of players who have done it. We just have to see if over the years he can continue to accrue higher numbers. 40,000, 50,000, maybe 60,000. Who really knows? Kareem Hunt would get 59 rushing yards and a touchdown. Travis Kelce would get 10 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown as well, making him the 5th tight end in NFL history to reach 75 career receiving touchdowns. A great accomplishment for him as well. When what seems like a down season, and especially through the first few games or so, he's turned it up a notch over the past few. Which is scary, especially if, you get DeAndre Hopkins, who would also finish with 2 receptions for 29 yards in this game. If you can get him to turn it up just even a little bit, you're already in trouble. Like, they're just finding different ways to win, and they're not even playing their best football, it seems. A very harrowing realization for many teams. Xavier Worthy, again, would also get 37 receiving yards. Meanwhile, the Raiders, I guess it's not a terrible game by Gardner Minshew II, though it's still a situation where, like, okay, a 24 of 30 for 80% completion, 209-yard passing, 2-touchdown game isn't necessarily bad enough to lose us the game, but are you doing enough to win when you're taking a 5-yard sack on 4th and goal from the 3 and you're fumbling the ball and that leads to another Chiefs touchdown? Like, those miscues led to 10 points and swung the pendulum in the Chiefs' favor. Is that really enough to win a football game? That's what one has to ask themselves. Brock Bowers continues to lead the charge, getting 5 receptions for 58 yards. Meanwhile, the rushing attack is non-existent. Like, is it really noteworthy to talk about a team who rushes for 33 combined yards with 6 different rushers on 21 carries and 1.6 yards of pop? No, that's fucking atrocious. The Chiefs win that one 27-20. We move on to the Titans and Lions, and really, there isn't much to say about it. I mean, credit to the Titans, a little bit of credit to the Titans. They hung in there for a little bit. It was tied 14-14 at the beginning of the second quarter after a Mason Rudolph touchdown pass and Nick Westbrook-Akina. All I gotta tell you is that they scored 38 unanswered points from there. It's very revealing when a team can combine for less than 100 yards passing. Let's just make that threshold. And still beat you to a bloody pulp. Because they didn't even have to go all out to win the game against this trash-ass fucking team. They got exposed on so many fronts. And if you aren't convinced after this one that the Titans are probably the worst team in the league, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. I don't. 3 different quarterbacks only attained 94 passing yards. Hendon Hooker got reps in because the score was that bad by that point. Jared Goff still managed to complete 80% of his passes, but he only needed 85 passing yards, and he had 3 touchdowns and only 3 incompletions. Even David Montgomery threw a 3-yard touchdown pass to Sam Laporta. Khalif Raymond was the next most prolific wide receiver in this game by not only getting 14 receiving yards and a touchdown himself with 2 catches, but also returning a punt 90 yards for a score. Brock Wright had a single catch for 8 yards and a touchdown. If I were to tell you that Amon-Ra St. Brown had a game in his career where he finished with just 2 catches and 7 fucking yards and a touchdown, and the Lions won that game, you'd look at me like I was fucking crazy. They win it by 38 fucking points. Like, at that point, you just gotta give it up, man. Jahmyr Gibbs would also get a 70-yard rushing touchdown earlier in the game, finished with 127 yards and 11 rushes. David Montgomery would also get a rushing touchdown. 33 yards and 9 rushes, but still, they were just on fire after that point. Even Sione Vaki, the running back safety out of Utah, got reps at safety in this game and finished with a tackle. That is just so bad. It's a shock to even see that Jack Fox punted 5 times in this game. Didn't feel like that was the case. But the Lions just wanted to show mercy, I guess. If this is a definition of showing mercy, allowing the Titans to score a little more points than the Cowboys did while scoring more points than you did in that very game and beating them by the same amount, if that's mercy to someone, so be it, I suppose. Even with Calvin Ridley having a great game, it was a waste. Even with Tony Pollard having a respectable game, it was a waste. Like, to read off these numbers doesn't even do them any justice. I ain't gonna, because what does it matter? What does it matter at that point when Mason Rudolph is throwing interceptions to Kirby fucking Joseph and to Nowaski? Who even is that? I don't know. Just an all around, another belt to ass by the Lions in the season. Like, they are just surging right now, dude. It's crazy to see. Moving on to the Packers and the Jaguars. Now, from what I heard, Jordan Love would go down with a groin injury. Granted, he is slated to return in this next game, so that's good. The game started out relatively slow. Get back-to-back picks, including one thrown to none other than Xavier McKinney, because of course the current interceptions leader in the NFL getting yet another one in another game. That's not totally surprising. And the Packers would score a touchdown with Josh Jacobs, and then score a field goal to take it up to 10-0, with Brandon McManus getting slight measures of revenge throughout this game, before the Jaguars would get a Trevor Lawrence rushing touchdown, and then they would trade field goals before sending it into a 13-10 ballgame, led by none other than the Packers. After a couple punts to open up the third quarter, the Jags would mount a 10-play, 93-yard drive, ended off by a Brian Thomas 14-yard touchdown catch. And then that was followed up by a 38-yard touchdown run by Josh Jacobs at the end of the quarter. A fumble by the Jaguars would lead to another touchdown score. Very short drive in which Malik Willis would be in this game, getting a touchdown pass to Tucker Kraft for 3 yards and making it a 27-17 score. The Jaguars would then get 10 straight points as Trevor Lawrence, with, a little bit of, underwhelming play earlier on, we saw why he's getting the money he's getting, leading a drive like that, and getting Evan Engram the 14-yard touchdown catch. But I guess Malik Willis decided to be a little more clutch in this game, leading them on a field goal drive, with including a Jaden Reed 51-yard catch that got them in Jacksonville's red zone. And Brandon McManus would get his revenge, the greatest measure of revenge in this game, with a game winner. Jordan Love did not have the greatest of performances, even when he was in with, just an interception and 196 yards. Malik Willis, though, would complete 80% of his passes for just 56 yards and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs, though, this is one of his better games for the Packers so far. 25 rushes, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5.1 yards a carry. You'll take that shit. As much as Jayden Reed is the wide receiver one, he kind of took a backseat to Tucker Kraft, who finished with 78 receiving yards and a touchdown, and Romeo Doubs, who finished with 72 receiving yards on 3 catches. Trevor Lawrence would have a good game. He kept them in it, and he tied it up when he needed to have it. So you've got to credit him with that. 65.6% completion, 308 yards passing, and 2 touchdowns with just the interception. Like, that's solid work. Moving on to the Cardinals and Dolphins as they spoil Tua Tagovailoa's return by beating yet another team with Chad fucking Ryland as their kicker as he got the game winner. Now that field goal drive was aided by multiple big time plays to none other than Marvin Harrison Jr. Shoutout, the beautiful touchdown catch to make it a 20-18 game in the first place. And then you trickle down late into the fourth quarter. You get him making plays like that. Amazing work there. Like, all things considered, outside of a safety committed by Tua Tagovailoa, a relatively good game in his return, as he would finish with 28-38 passing, turned to 34 yards and a touchdown. But more importantly, he would get A-Chain and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Everybody just getting more involved than they had gotten with having guys like Tyler Huntley and Tim Boyle on the backfield. Like, nah. Devon A-Chain had 10 rushes for 97 yards and 6 receptions for 50. Tyreek Hill would get 6 receptions for 72 yards. And there were even some heavy cheers from the crowd as Tua Tagovailoa would elect to slide. Which you want to see him maintain that, because that's what he should have been doing in the first place. Whoever was telling him to dive head first is an idiot. Like, it didn't even make sense to me that was going down. Kyler Murray would finish with 2 touchdown passes, no picks, and 307 passing yards. McBride and Harrison combined for 15 total catches and 235 of those yards, with the aforementioned Marvin Harrison Jr. touchdown catch. Is that how it should be? Yes. That's exactly how it should be. They accounted for 235 yards of Kyler Murray's 307 passing. That's optimal. That's very optimal. I have no issue with that whatsoever. Especially if it's going to get you a win like that. And that's what it has been like for the Cardinals. Just when you think that they're not going to pull a game out, they just hang in there. They just do a great job of creeping up on their opponent. And just when you least expect it, bam! The game's over. They have the win. You don't. Now moving on to another Falcons-Bucs matchup in which Kirk Cousins continued to torch the Bucs. His 276 passing yards and 4 touchdown passes would give him precedent, as he would have 8 total touchdown passes against them this season alone. The fact that these games are so tight as well, despite being within just a few weeks of each other this early in the season, I guess they're just glad that it's out of the way now. You know, even without guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, the Bucs, credit to them, did hang around, and they were helped, especially in the fourth quarter, following a safety that took place after an interception thrown by Baker Mayfield to A.J. Terrell Jr. They were down 31-19 at that point, and then mounted a touchdown drive capped off by a K-Dot touchdown catch. And then a missed field goal from Younghoe Koo, rare as it is. That's now consecutive games against the Bucs where that's happened in that magnitude. Now the Bucs would fail on their own Hail Mary attempt because Baker Mayfield's just got too strong of an arm sometimes. He just chucked it straight out of the end zone. And that was that. Now, Darnell Mooney and Kyle Pitts would lead the show with 9 total receptions for 183 total yards with 3 total touchdowns. Kyle Pitts having 2 of those, including one that was a little controversial because there was a ruling that he fumbled it just before reaching the end zone, and that was on the part of Antoine Winfield Jr. potentially making a good play, but they overturned it, called it a touchdown, and it moved on from there. The Bucs, on the other hand, Baker Mayfield would throw 50 passes, but complete 74% of them for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns with the aforementioned 2 interceptions. Their rushing attack was, I guess, fine. This is a game of, back and forth air raid attacks. You weren't too worried about running the ball here, all things considered. As random as some of these receivers are, they did all combine to step up and make sure that the Bucs had a fighting chance to stay in it. So that's respectable enough. Moving on to Colts-Texans, all I've got to say about this is that the Texans won it 23-20. There's just one overarching thing that I have to say. Well, 2 actually. I'll start with the biggest news to just not be a troll, a dickhead, right? But look, Stefon Diggs was said to have torn his ACL, a non-contact injury during the game, and he's going to miss the rest of the season. So that's unfortunate for the Texans in the offseason, where they go out and get him to strengthen their wide receiver core more than anything. They're obviously still missing Stefon Diggs. They're expecting Tank Dell to get an elevated role. Maybe John Mechie III gets an elevated role a little bit as well. So we'll have to monitor that situation. But another situation that has been developing over a little bit, and I'll get into the outcome of it as I talk about the developments over the course of the past couple days following action. But all I've got to say is that as far as this game goes right here, Anthony Richardson is actually a wild, all right? The press conference after the game, he said that he removed himself for a single play out of the game after scrambling all over the place because he was tired. And granted, that can be fair. That can be true at times. I can understand that. But in a game where Anthony Richardson literally completes just 31.2% of his passes against the Texans, a few weeks after the Texans forced Josh Allen, of all quarterbacks, into similar territory in terms of inefficiency, you complete just 10 passes on 32 attempts, throw an interception, and get the one long touchdown pass to Josh Downs for 69 yards. Outside of that, the game was relatively lackluster. And you have to give respect to the Colts defense for at least trying their hardest to keep the Texans from continuing to strike. They did a great job of that. That's on the backs of them. You had chances. The game was still close, and you couldn't make anything happen because you couldn't even complete one simple pass. That is atrocious, man. That's horrible. More to come on that in just a second. We're going to run through these other games here. Moving on to Jets-Patriots, the Jets are ass. They are garbage. They are garbage, man. Drake May gets concussed and sent out of the game, and you allow Jacoby Brissett to step back in and lead a game-winning touchdown drive in which Ramondre Stevenson scored not just the game-winning touchdown, but also the game-sealing 2-point conversion. No urgency on the final drive, would lead to the game being effectively over from there. I just like it's just terrible, man. It's bad, bro. It's not even like that's a bad game from Aaron Rodgers. Also, I mean, 60.7% completion, 233 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. By no means is that bad, but a little more has to be done at some point. It should also be noted, too, that Greg Zuerlein just has to be removed from the NFL. Because his missed kicks did make a difference as well. He missed the field goal, which would have timed the game. He missed the PAT, which would have given them the victory in any other circumstance. But of course, because it's this season and he's playing so bad. Oh, man. Like, he's got to go. They just got to find a different kicker at this point. Like, every level. Special teams is garbage. Defense is underwhelming just a little bit now. And the offense is just not doing enough, it seems like. But the problem was Robert Saleh. The problem was Robert Saleh. Like, it just still, you know, he's living the life. He is living the life. They should have never fired him. That was not your problem. There's clearly more pressing matters and overarching issues with this damn team, man. Moving on to Eagles-Bengals, it was the first matchup between Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow since they were drafted, and the Eagles won it 37-13. Jalen Hurts vultured 3 different touchdown runs in this game. He only needed the 1 touchdown pass, which was a 45-yarder to Devontae Smith, who led all receivers for the Eagles with 84 receiving yards and 6 receptions. Will Shipley has still not managed to figure it out, but Saquon Barkley gets yet another great rushing performance for him. 22 rushes, 108 yards rushing. And again, Hurts was effective. Even if he didn't have to pass the ball a lot, you know, out of 20 passes, he completed 80% of those. Averaged 11.8 yards a pass, trying his hardest to stretch the field whenever he was throwing. Like, that's great production. An interception by C.J. Gardner-Johnson over the course of this game was the least of Joe Burrow's worries, as the Eagles' defense, you know, they started out the scoring, the Bengals did, with a touchdown catch by Jamar Chase, who still leads all receivers in the NFL in touchdowns scored. They kept it close, but again, the Eagles would take it over after their last touchdown drive in the third quarter, and led the Bengals to a drive that ended on downs. From there, it was all Eagles. A fumble forced by Zach Bond and recovered by Nakobe Dean in a drive where they were down 34-17, just put the icing on the cake, really. Like, Joe Burrow certainly could have done better here. The touchdown, the 1 pick, not necessarily enough to win the game. Had to do just a little more. Just a little more. Saints-Chargers. The game started out 2-3. The Chargers did finally decide to turn it up after a 60-yard touchdown catch eventually in the third quarter by Lab McConkey after a J.K. Dobbins touchdown gave them a 16-5 lead. Beats me, man. The Saints are just going through it. They say that Derek Carr has a chance to return in this upcoming game. Man, they kind of need it. I don't know. Like, something has to give at some point. They played 3 different quarterbacks. They played Rattler. They played Heinrich. They gave Hill a snap. Typically, they would anyways, and he's healthy. But, like, man, jeez. Lab McConkey, though, let me tell you something. Lab McConkey, like I said, man's a dog. I don't know why the Ravens were not thinking about drafting this man. A 6-reception, 111-yard performance for him and 2 touchdown catches, including a 9-yarder in the fourth quarter that, just made the game even worse for the Saints and giving the final score of 26-8. Herbert will finish with 279 yards passing and 2 touchdown passes as well. And Panthers-Broncos, they started Bryce Young. 2 touchdowns and 2 picks for him. But I guess you just did not want to go back to Andy Dalton after the ass whooping you took last week. I mean, it started out promising that Xavier Legette got a pretty good touchdown catch, but scoring stalled for a while after, as Bo Nix would just turn it on completely. Like, by the end of the half, the score was 21-7. After he got a rushing touchdown, they would continue to turn the ball over, whether, throwing interceptions, punting the ball away, or turning it over on downs. The only reason they got another touchdown score is quite simply, it came with 2 minutes and 13 seconds on a drive that, started with 2 minutes and 13 seconds left in the game and ended with 18 seconds left. They stood no chance at that point. Browns defense was just on top of everything over the course of this one. As Bo Nix would also have a pretty good performance. 4 total touchdowns for him, 284 yards passing, and 75.7% completion. Riley Dixon, the punter, would also have a completed pass, and Cortland Sutton would also have a completed pass to the fullback, Michael Burton. Cortland Sutton also finished with 8 receptions for 100 yards. Pristine. Alright, that'll do it for the games. But now we have to move on to some developments. So for the tight end position group on Sunday, it being National Tight Ends Day and all, they would combine for 177 total receptions, which is the most for them in NFL history on any given single day of football. That's pretty interesting when you think about it. I would have thought that something like that happened before. There's always so much action going on that you are never truly sure sometimes. It could have already happened. But I guess just not. So that was shocking to find out. On Monday, it would be detailed by multiple sources that Josh Uche, Patriots edge rusher, will be traded to the Kansas City Chiefs for a 6th-round pick in 2026. Now, as far as his career goes, from what I am seeing here, he had his very good season, all things considered, in 2022 when he finished with 11.5 sacks, 27 tackles, 14 quarterback hits, and 2 forced fumbles, all of which were career highs for him. He regressed a lot last year, despite getting a couple starts. And that's what this is, in a way. He's going to be a rotational piece for Kansas City, with guys like George Karlaftis and Felix Anudike-Uzomah already taking the mantle in that regard. He will get a reasonable amount of snaps per game. He's not necessarily going to be relied on to be that game breaker that he would have needed to be alongside a guy like Matthew Judon, because you have the help of Chris Jones. You have the help of George Karlaftis. You have the help of a stout front seven. So you're good with this. Even with him having a start in this season and only having 13 combined tackles and 2 sacks. Like, the Chiefs just get a quality rotational piece. And they don't lose much of anything. Like a 6th round pick in 2026. There's no telling how valuable that could potentially be right now. And you can assure yourself some continuity at that position immediately. Why would you not take that? That's a good move. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. It would also be detailed by Shane Steichen that they would look into, the situation, essentially, according to a press conference by him, reported by NFL Network. And again, he detailed that he was asked about Anthony Richardson's availability to start, and he just wanted to see how things would play out. Anytime a coach says something along those lines, you know it's going to get bad. And on yesterday, it would be detailed that Anthony Richardson would officially be benched for Joe Flacco. Which makes sense, because I'm going to go deeper into the numbers here. Anthony Richardson is the least effective quarterback in the NFL. The numbers do not lie. His 44.4% completion percentage in the NFL ranks worst amongst all starting quarterbacks. Like, dead ass. Like, I know Joe Flacco's a bit older and a bit slower. He doesn't offer that same mobility that Anthony Richardson does, and that's what makes it, palatable and appealing for him to start. But at least Joe Flacco, even though he'll find himself in positions where he can be reckless, he has the years of experience to know when and how wise he needs to be with the football, taking calculated risks instead of just pulling something out of his ass and trying to make something happen that literally cannot. That's Joe Flacco for you at this current point. And even in a backup role, he has displayed multiple times over the past few seasons that he has done more than his fair share of turning these teams around into potential playoff contenders. He did it with the Browns last year after Deshaun Watson went down, even with no one expecting it. Who's to say he can't do that for the Colts? And the Colts have a bit more in their favor than the Browns did. So, am I shocked by that move? I'm absolutely not. It's the right thing. It's the right thing to do because, for all intents and purposes, as promising as he can be, Anthony Richardson isn't ready. He's not. He needs a little more time. They knew he was going to be a project quarterback. This was understood. They understood that efficiency was going to be a problem for him. But no one could have anticipated it being this atrociously bad, right? No one. I seriously did not see that coming whatsoever. It's wild, man. Like, whoa. Moving on to that, later on in the day, it would be detailed that Diontae Johnson and a 6th round pick would be traded to the Ravens, and they would send a 2025 5th round pick to the Carolina Panthers. It was on pace to match his last year in Pittsburgh, where he accrued 51 receptions, 717 yards, and 5 touchdown catches, which would have been his worst output since his rookie season in Pittsburgh. Now, it's certainly been a while since he's been like a prime player, and I know like some people were touting him as a wide receiver one. I don't necessarily see him as that, but if anything, it just adds more depth to the Ravens core, and it's quite the twist of irony, right? The Steeler becoming a Raven? Really? Though, I mean, I guess Patrick Queen in the offseason did become a Steeler after being a Raven. Geno Stone, rather, did become a Cincinnati Bengal after being a Baltimore Raven. So, I mean, I guess this just happens all the time. He should be inspired to, play a lot harder for a quarterback like Lamar Jackson than he'll play for a quarterback like Bryce Young, even though he tried his best to defend him through some of his interviews with the Panthers over the course of the season. Like, Lamar Jackson's going to make him look very good in that offense. They'll just have to figure out what kind of plays to draw up for him to get going. What do they think, and what does Diontae Johnson think works best for him? Is he also in the leverage to ask that? Does he have the leverage to ask that kind of question? That is a fair question to be asked as well. So, And lastly, the Vikings would trade a conditional 5th round pick to the Jaguars, and they would receive left tackle Cameron Robinson and a 2026 6th rounder in return. They need Cam Robinson in a way right now because I did fail to detail it earlier, but it makes sense to mention now, that Christian Darrisaw, the Vikings O-lineman, was hurt with a hamstring injury. So he'll be out. And Robinson steps in as a solid replacement. Now, when I look here, his penalties have not been too atrocious. He's only had one false start this season, and he's only had 2 total penalties called on him. So that's actually not bad at all. He's just going to offer good enough pass protection. They would hope so. Because as much as Darrisaw could do it, they don't have that asset to exhaust right now. He's got to rest up and recover. So they will try to see how everything pans out with that. Now, that'll do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.